Good day, my name is Bluesuit and today we'll be going over my review of the atmospheric, story-driven, Scandinavian-inspired modern point-and-click mystery adventure game that is Roki. Roki takes place in Scandinavian folklore with ancient forests and gigantic monsters. You play as Tove, a young girl living in her cabin in the secluded wilderness with her rambunctious little brother and drunken slob of a father. Roki starts off pretty slowly, introducing the game's various mechanics while drawing you in with the fantastic art style and downright wonderful soundtrack. They both complement the story so well, adding joy to the moments Tove gets to spend with her family and panic when she's frightened. Roki's story is such an emotional experience, and so much of that is due to how it's presented. All of the video that you'll see in this review today is from the first couple hours of the game, because the story is really so amazing and I don't want to give away anything important. Even in the game's introductory stages, there's so much foreshadowing, and it's clear how many twists and turns that you're going to be in for. It's done so well, and it made me so curious to see how everything was going to unfold. In Chapter 2, the game opens up a little bit more, and you're given more freedom of choice. Not so much with how the story develops, but you can decide which of the game's major objectives you want to tackle first. The puzzles start to get progressively harder and more interesting, and the story becomes darker as Tove struggles to save her family, relive her past, and learn what really makes someone a monster. At this point in the game, I was already hooked, and then Chapter 3 happened, and Roki went from being a really good story-driven game to an amazing story-driven game that everyone should get the chance to experience at least once. It's haunting and joyful and sad and beautiful at the same time. And what started as a slow burn turned into perfect pacing. Tove is dealing with loss and fear and redemption, and you start to even resent the puzzles because they're keeping you from getting to the next bit of story. But the puzzles, while pale in comparison to the story, are quite good themselves. Evolved from the point-and-click games of yesteryear, Roki doesn't involve a lot of action. Instead, the game has you inspecting objects and using items to solve puzzles to progress the story. It's actually a pretty clever system. Sometimes having an item isn't enough. It may need to be combined with one or more other items, or it may need to be sharpened or lit on fire before you can use it. Tying multiple bed sheets to form a rope, for example, or making porridge so the Tamte would help me get the milestone working, were solutions that gave me pause but never felt unrealistic or illogical. It keeps the gameplay from devolving into just trying every key and every keyhole until it works. For the first several hours of the game, the puzzles really don't seem to keep up with the game's dark, mature story, but eventually they do become quite challenging. That being said, even the simple early game puzzles were still fun and satisfying to complete. And with each one solved, you get to travel further into the world and see more of the stunning locations and meet stranger and stranger characters, many of which look nefarious but end up being befriended by Tove's unerring kindness. Roki isn't without her issues, however, and there are a couple things that players should be aware of before they pick it up. The first is that the game isn't very long. Your first playthrough will clock in at around 14 hours, and there really isn't any replayability here because there's only one specific solution to each of the game's various puzzles. The second is that the controls are unique to the point where they don't really feel intuitive, and I often found myself stumbling over them even though they're really quite simple. Mouse and keyboard are basically unusable. It seems like they would be perfect for a game like this, but there's no mouse cursor, and the tutorial has you with one hand on WASD, one hand on the enter button, and one hand on the mouse. And the last thing is that Roki is a very slow, deliberately paced, non-violent game. This is certainly not a negative thing in any way, but if you don't really have the patience to sit through a well-crafted story without killing something, then you might find that Roki isn't really worth your time. Roki will release on Steam on July 23rd for $20. Its art, its music, its characters, its puzzles, and especially its story are just wonderful, and I had an enormous amount of fun with this game that I won't soon forget. However, I do wish the story was longer, so I'm valuing Roki at $19, and I really hope that developer Polygon Treehouse is planning a sequel. I hope that you enjoyed this review of Roki. Come see me on Twitch where you can watch our reviews in progress 5 nights a week. As always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what you thought about it. Until next time, peace!